Hi, everyone. Welcome for joining us today. I'm going to wait just a few more seconds as we allow some people to get on before I get started, but I appreciate everyone joining us today to learn more about Kenya. Just a few more seconds and we'll get started. I see more people. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to On the Horizon. This is a live presentation from Ker Downey. As a leading tour operator of the world, we wanted to create as we could come and gather and get your questions answered and learn more about those next places on your bucket list. I know we're all ready to just get checking them off again. I'm your host, Sarah Kramer. I'm joined today by my co-host, Tiffany Dunn. Hey, Tiff. Today we are talking about traveling to Kenya with one of our Africa specialists, MJ Eraci. MJ has traveled all over Africa, but Kenya was her first destination that she traveled to in Africa, which ultimately left her hooked. She loves the culture, the landscapes, the traditional safari experience that Kenya has to offer. So we are excited to have her here today. At the end, we will be answering your questions, but if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to head on over to the chat box and type them in, and then we'll answer them at the end. So hello, MJ. How are you doing today? I've been in Chicago.
Oh, I'm good. I'm good.
Good. Okay. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about why you were drawn to Kenya in particular.
Well, as you mentioned, you know, I love the culture, the wildlife. It was my first safari destination that I went to, and it had me hooked. The people are amazing, and I have been lucky to travel all over the world and do many destinations, but it's the ones that make you want to go back that, kind of hit you in the heart. Kenya is a place that I will continue to go back to for the rest of my life and always recommend as a safari destination for sure.
Yeah, like so often people, like the first place that they go in Africa is where they get the most hooked, for those that are fortunate enough to have been to many places in Africa. And Kenya was not my first place in Africa, but still it is definitely one of my places that I want to go back to. It's one of my favorites in Africa for all the same reasons. It's just so beautiful.
I know, I agree. It's great. Okay, so can you, before we get started in talking about answering the questions, can you tell us a little bit about the different areas of Kenya? I know people know pretty much about the Masai Mara. We hear about the migration all the time, which we'll get a little bit further into as we move along. But can you speak a little bit about the different areas of Kenya and what makes them different?
Kenya is definitely a one country destination because it has so much to offer. So in addition to the Masai Mara, which obviously if you're a first time safari goer, you're not gonna miss that. The national park systems, you'll see some of them that are listed on the map. So like Amboseli and Samburu. One of my favorite areas is Laikipia. So it's a large area, but I love combining that, especially with like the Mara, because you can do some other activities such as hikes and walks, and they have great conservation. So beautiful scenery, amazing landscapes. That's just, you can have a lot of difference between the north and south of Kenya for sure.
Yeah,
and the migration.
Yeah, and even the different animal species that you can see. You mentioned Laikipia. One of the things that I love about that region is like the opportunity to see rhinos that you do nearly as much of an opportunity for in either, Mara or Amboseli or some of the other areas. It's a great place for rhino sightings. And there are different species as well of like zebra and giraffe that are totally different than the ones that you would see in the Mara. So it's a great opportunity to like diversify your.
Right, and I do have to add too that like in the Mara, typically there are some conservancies around that you can walk, but the traditional Masai Mara experience is in vehicles, whereas when you are in the northern part of Kenya, which would be where Laikipia is, Samburu, Lewa, you can get out and walk. There's horseback riding and some other parks and things like that. So it's just, I agree, it's really good to combine them so you can kind of get all the experiences.
Get out of the vehicle, and you see, I mean, you see different things when you're, it's a whole nother world, you know, seeing different things when you take a hike versus a vehicle. It's just a nice
right.
combo.
Okay, so how do people get to Kenya? What are your typical flight routes from the United States? And then what does that look like now as some of the flights had to cut back because of COVID?
Yeah, some of the flights have cut back, but you can still fly through, you know, London, Frankfurt, go through Qatar, via Doha, Emirates via Dubai. Kenya Airways is resuming their nonstop service from JFK to Nairobi at the end of the month. So that is definitely one I would, you know, recommend, especially now, so you don't have to have, you know, connections or transit. We do have an air department. If you're not aware, I highly recommend booking through our air department, because with air changes and schedule changes, they can assist you and be on top of that in the event that that occurs.
Yes, I agree. When is the best time to travel to Kenya? We've all been there and we've all traveled at different times, so we're all going to have a little bit different experience. But what is your favorite time of year to be there? And then speak a little bit about, you know, high season and low season and the difference in that too.
I mean, Kenya's pretty much a year-round destination. Traditionally, historically, they do have rainy season kind of April, May-ish. I've always been kind of on the, you know, shoulder season. So I've done, you know, February, March, November, but I would go anytime, you know, anytime I can get there, I will go. The busiest times tend to be kind of during like June, July, August, September-ish. So those are more of the peak times. So that's.
Yeah, and people, you know, tend to think of seeing river crossings with the migration at that, which is why that time of year is popular. Not to mention that it's a good time for people to travel if they have families that are off of school or, you know, have holidays and things during that time. But, you know, I think sometimes we tend to focus so much on like the migration and the river crossings that we overlook the fact that like Kenya year round has incredible resident game, no matter what time of year you go. And you kind of have to go there and experience it to realize like, oh, I forgot that the reason why I thought I was coming was because of my person, because you end up seeing so much more than what you anticipated.
The migration's always happening. I mean, it's a different stage of it, you know.
About the migration and what that experience is like in East Africa.
Yeah, I think too, people get confused too that you can see the migration, you know, they're crossing the river from Tanzania into the Masai Mara anywhere from July to September. It depends on the rains. It depends. And so the wildebeest, they're moving in search of food, right? So they're grazing and they're crossing the river to get over the river into the Masai Mara for food. So, what happens is they get into the Masai Mara for food, and then they come back around to Tanzania, and it's called the calving season. And then you can see the wildebeest in the Serengeti, the southern Serengeti. That's actually when Tiffany and I went to Tanzania, we saw it, the calving season in Tanzania. And it is amazing as well, because you're just, you know, it's just seas of wildebeest and baby wildebeest. So there is something special to be said about every part of the migration, not just the river crossing. So we get this question a lot of times from first safari goers. Packing. It can be a little bit daunting because you hear, I need certain colors, I need to keep my weight restrictions within a certain limit because the small aircrafts only require so much baggage, things like that. Can you speak a little bit about what that looks like, what someone can expect for their first time going to Kenya, and how they should pack? Just a few little tips. I know that each designer will give certain tips when someone actually books, but just your overarching tips on what that would look like.
Yeah, so I would suggest, khaki, light clothes. Ones that are quick dry are always good. So, those materials that are the quick dry material. Maybe the long sleeve shirts that can go up to short sleeves, layering because it can get, chilly in the evening or early mornings, like a vest or a fleece, I always recommend. And yeah, you can get laundry done. So probably eliminate some of the stuff that you're thinking you need and, remove some. Shoes wise, a lot of people ask about do I need real hiking shoes? Comfortable walking shoes with a good tread. We can give you recommendations on that. No matter where you're going, I love a good packing cube. that helps you, you know, keep your stuff organized, keep your dirty, you know, and from the clean and all that. So we can definitely help you, you know, with ideas.
I know if it doesn't fit in the packing cube, then it's not going, you know, it just already does your packing for you.
Yeah. And you can see on that picture, you know, they look a lot more chic than I think I ever have, but you know, that's kind of, you know, comfortable clothes too.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Comfort is key, especially East Africa. It's very casual. You don't have to, you know, be dressed up for dinners or anything like that. Comfort is key, and those packing cubes are awesome for any destination, but they are key to a successful safari.
I agree. And just to reiterate that every place that you go, other than maybe the property in Nairobi, just depending on where you are, has laundry and a hair dryer, if you can use a hair dryer, and all the things you would need if you need them, and they'll be there. So the hardest thing for me to part with was a hair dryer, just you know, but no.
Just let,
now
and
like,
a hat. Everyone should have a hat. Bring a hat. Bring a hat.
I agree. Okay, so the question, moving on to a more COVID-related question, but also the general shots question. Are there any shots that you need to get into Kenya? I know it just seems like now with COVID, it's just one more thing to add to the list of things you need to do to get into Kenya. But talk a little bit about the shots you would need, malaria in general, and then we'll talk about COVID a little bit.
Yep. Malaria is recommended. The CDC does recommend yellow fever, but that also, depending on if you're doing anything else, if you're coming from another area that has it, so you can discuss that with your designer, and ultimately a travel doctor or your doctor to see, you know. But yellow fever now you can get the shot that lasts a lifetime. So that's, you know, if you're planning on traveling to other places ever that require it, it can't hurt. And the malaria pills too as well.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say too, with the yellow fever vaccination, it's quite funny because in the travel business, it's sort of been a known thing. You know, you have to get it for certain destinations, but in 10 years, I've never been asked to show it at any country that I'm supposed to have it. But that is definitely something that will change now as a result of COVID.
And a lot more strict, yeah.
Looking for other information as you arrive, they're more likely to ask for that.
Yeah.
Definitely, speak with your designer and make sure that for your particular itinerary, if it does combine other countries, that they can advise as to what you'll need.
Right. And as far as malaria medication, your doctor will recommend. There are a couple different options. Some are shorter, like a shorter span of time where you take it. Some are longer. Like an antibiotic, there's an antibiotic you can take, but it's like 6 weeks you have to take it. So it just kind of depends on what your doctor recommends, and then also you know, what you can take. So your doctor should know. And then if not, there literally are travel doctors that are in your area. They are fewer, obviously, than the normal doctors, but you just make an appointment and go, and they can speak to you specifically on that destination and what is recommended. Okay, so on top of everyone's mind, we're going to jump into COVID and the pandemic. What are the entry and exit requirements to get into Kenya, and what are some of the things that Kenya is doing to ensure the overall safety of travelers?
Well, Kenya was one of the first countries to lock down when this all occurred, so they've had measures in place and have been doing a great job. You still need a visa. In the past, you would get that before get that there. You should just get it before. They have an e-visa system. It's just more seamless. You don't want any longer complications while you're there. Everyone needs the PCR test 96 hours prior to arrival, and it must be the PCR. They do not accept one of those rapid tests. You do need to make sure your documentation states that on, your form, and have multiple copies, because you could be asked that at check-in points or transit points by the airlines as well. When you arrive, you'll get a temperature check. Has to be 99.5 or lower. You will get temperature checks throughout your stay too as well. So the lodges will do that as well. And then there's a travel health surveillance form that you have to fill out prior. And that will generate one of those QR codes. You'll have that on your phone, but you should print it out and have that copy, because they'll scan that when you get there. And then you'll be asked to fill out a contact tracing form too as well.
Yeah, and
A
that's
few forms, but it's worth it.
and one of the great things too is like now with testing, the results are turning around much quicker.
Yes.
We can, if you're in any of the cities where we all live, we can definitely point you to specific places that we can recommend that we've personally used. And then there also are options, you know, for send off mail-in options as well if you are not located in a you know, close to a city where you can easily access those quick turnaround times.
And one other thing, masks will be obviously required on the planes and the airports. On the little regional flights, they do require the surgical type. So just so you're aware of that.
Yeah, something too about flights that's really interesting is right now, I recently flew domestically and my flights were totally full, whereas international flights right now are still really quite empty. So you have a lot more space if you fly anytime soon internationally than what you would have, you know, flying domestically here in the US. So.
Okay, so speak a little bit about like if you're in Kenya and the airline is requiring you to have another test on your return, what would that look like if you're in Kenya? How would you get that test?
Well, we can work with the lodges, and they do also have certain areas where you'll be able to get that test and coordinate that if you do require that for that international flight on the way home.
So
the lodges obviously realize that this is necessary for bringing guests back, and so they've coordinated sort of centers around, you know, like around the Masai Mara there are testing centers, and around Laikipia there's a testing center, and around Amboseli, so those main areas. And then if for people that are staying at some of the more remote exclusive use properties like Oljogi, they actually bring people out to your camp. They'll test you there. Again, with any of these options, like it would basically be, you know, in midday, you could go, they would drive you to the center, the lodge would, you get your tests, you come back, you do your afternoon safari, you get your results 24 hours later, and then you're good to go on your flight home. So, and they're consistent with turnaround times and being able to get the documentation that you need to get back home.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I take the hat off to the fact that like
the coordination.
Kenya they really are the forefront of testing and getting people back into their country and making people feel safe and confident to travel. I think that's amazing. We hear all the time about countries opening their borders and closing their borders. Right when this started, we had a few countries open their borders and then immediately shut them down. And that was a little bit disheartening for us as in the travel industry. As we have moved further into this pandemic, we've seen, you know, once people have started to open the borders, they pretty much stay open. But obviously there could always be, you know, the one or two that shut. So can you speak a little bit about Kenya specifically? Is there any threat of them closing their borders as we move, you know, further along in this pandemic?
Well, they have done such a great job and taken the measures, so I don't feel that will happen. And tourism is such a key and an important part of, you know, for Kenya. They are doing everything they can to keep open. And it's a fluid situation, so I can't guarantee, you know, what will happen in the world, but I feel comfortable that Kenya will remain open and continue to do an amazing job and be the wonderful destination that it is.
Yeah, they truly have been. They were the first country, and then now we have Rwanda. Tanzania was kind of right there. Those were the first African countries really to get the ball rolling. And you know, as hesitant as we were to say, are they really, like, are they just want people back? Is it safe? There have been numerous of our travel industry partners that have been and said, this is the real deal. So we as a company do feel confident that Kenya will stay open through this. Of course, obviously we have to give that disclaimer, but we do feel confident that that they are just the forerunners of all of this. So I would say feel confident in travel to Kenya if you have that on the books in the next couple months. Let's move on about space. We spoke about this a little bit last week about how a lot of people in 2020 were concerned about space just because they had booked in 2020 and it was all getting rebooked for 2021. And now, as we're a little bit more confident that things are actually going to take place in 2021, space is really going to be an issue, especially for the safari destinations. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so with bookings moving, that has, that will limit some of the space, because many times people will plan their Kenya safari a year or so ahead. So if you're flexible with dates, I would kind of look at maybe off-peak time, shoulder season, which are some of my favorite. And we can always check, there may, your dates of travel, we can look at a couple ranges. And in the next few months though, you may be able to get a spot or a location that you may not have been able to get before, because there may be inventory available. And
yeah, definitely. There's,
some places that are like 2 years out that you have to book, right, Tiffany?
Giraffe Manor,
Yeah.
Iconic places like Giraffe Manor that, even two years out, you might not get space if you're going in peak season. And right now they still have availability for November and December, which is amazing. So it's an incredible opportunity to see some places that you might otherwise have to plan really far in advance to get to plan those last minute trips. So, and in fact, my husband and I were supposed to go to Rwanda in March, which didn't happen because of COVID. And so now we're planning last minute, Rwanda and possibly Kenya combo trip. And it's amazing, like how much is available. So we'll be excited to report back on that later.
Yeah, in December, right? Yeah, and I think it's important to note too that, safari destinations, especially the ones on the higher end, have a limited number of beds. So, you're looking at 8 beds, 16 beds, which is really not that many people. So especially if you're thinking about the migrations, the high season, July through September of next year, I know it can seem a little daunting to book a trip in a time like this, but I would definitely feel confident given the way that the industry is headed. We certainly are optimistic about it, but also just that space is going to be a little bit tighter than a normal year, and it's always it's always a tight year for migration season. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Let's talk about pricing a little bit. I know price can vary greatly from you have different levels of properties that you recommend. We tend to go more toward the luxury 4- and 5-star properties. Can you speak a little bit about the price variation and what someone can expect from a trip to Kenya?
Sure, and there's also seasonality variations that can have rates anywhere from 800 to like 900 per person per day to even up to like 2,000. But the thing to keep in mind is that includes your game drives, your activities, conservation fees, all your meals. So it's it's not like other destinations where you get there and then you have additional costs. So yeah, that's about the range, and we can definitely work with your financial comfort zone too as well and come up with the best options.
Yeah, we have, I think the only thing that you would be, that you would need to think about paying for in additional would be tips. We know some companies include their tips in their overall price. We do not. We have had that conversation many, many times. And maybe Tiffany can speak a little bit about why we choose to do tips and you do get a detailed tipping guideline, for every day, broke down for every service. But Tiffany, speak a little bit about why we've chosen at this moment in time to keep it like that.
Well, there are several reasons. One is that we just feel that tipping is a very personal thing, and there's something to be said about spending 4 days with your guide or your tracker or the staff at the property and being the one who's actually handing over that tip to them and thanking them for what a wonderful time you had. And then in addition to that, the reality is, if we're collecting tips and then we're paying someone in Kenya to pay someone else, like it loses that, personal touch of this came from you as a show of gratitude for the service that you received. And so we just feel like that's a really important aspect of your experience. Of course, there are times when we have like large family groups where they don't feel comfortable carrying around that amount of cash. And we can make arrangements when obviously that's necessary, but we do prefer to keep it a personal touch as much as possible.
I agree. Okay, so I asked this question. It's my favorite question to ask somebody. If you had 8 to 10 days in Kenya, where would you go and what properties would you include in that itinerary?
8 to 10 days. That's not enough. No, just kidding. Can I go for a month? A lot of people will fly in and do just the one night in Nairobi. I always recommend 2 where possible, and especially during these times where, you know, flight schedules may vary, or as we're going into the winter season in the US. I mean, I live in Chicago, so, you know, blizzards happen a lot. So just to have that buffer, because if there were any delays, you don't want that to ripple into your safari time. And also the jet lag after the, you know, the long flights, you want to be fresh and ready. And then I would probably do like longer stays and maybe just do 2 kind of locations. I'd probably do the Mara for 3 to 4 days, and then I would go back up to Sarara, which I visited on my last trip, which is in the Matthews Mountain Range, and just was one of my, I love a good dramatic view, so that was one of my favorite places, and I want to go back.
Yeah, when we were talking about this too, there really are so many great options in Kenya. I mean, you could essentially just stay in the Masai Mara. It's so huge, and there's such a variety of properties. There's a variety of experiences, you know, because the Masai Mara is the center, but then around the Masai Mara you have different conservancies and reserves that offer something totally different as well.
Yeah, so and then you don't have to fly in between them too. So that could be, you know, if you want to eliminate flying, you can do, you know, a longer stay in a certain region too, if you don't want to do the little plains or.
Right. So speak about some of our preferred properties in Kenya that we like to use.
Some of my favorites are Mara Plains, Rakero, Ngama Mara, Tangalia Mara. There's many, many more. Cotters. Yeah, there's so many to offer. Yeah.
There's so many. When I went to Eldonio, which is kind of in that Amboseli general area, I was literally in tears when I left because I loved it so much. And that's not a usual experience for me, leaving a property. So it's definitely my favorite. In fact, I think that picture in the lower left there is from Eldonio. You can do horseback riding there. But it was just such a special experience. And as MJ mentioned, some of our favorite properties, like on Ngama Mara, which is also pictured here, they have now opened up a new exclusive use safari camp. So there are really good options right now as well for people looking to have an exclusive experience. Their safari camp is just, can be for 2 people or up to 8 people total, but it would be just your party booked there. And there are some really reasonable rates for those exclusive options, which is great for right now as well.
Yeah, we have, if you're signed up for our newsletter, you'll receive it. If not, go to our website. But in the next week, or that might be tomorrow, we're sending out a list of exclusive use properties. So if that would make you feel more comfortable when you're traveling, just to have a private home, there's several options in Kenya that are great, all in different areas of Kenya. But I do also have to say that a lot of the properties that we do use are small in nature. So the social distancing thing is actually, it was already in place before this all happened. So so I think they'll just refine and tweak, but there are destinations that really haven't had to change much in terms of that because they just naturally have lended themselves to that. So I would say feel confident about travel to Kenya in terms of, you know, social distancing, all the measures that have been in place, all the properties that we would recommend. We get updates daily on what they're doing. So yeah, let me skip on over to accessibility. We had a question last week about, you know, if Kenya is a good destination for people that have mobility constraints. Would you recommend Kenya?
Yes, and we would be able to, you know, work with you and, you know, suggest properties that would work, you know, for your constraint for sure. And no problem getting on the small aircrafts, et cetera.
Yeah, I agree. We can cater to anything in Kenya. Occasionally we will get the question asking if someone should travel to East Africa or South Africa first. I know you went to East Africa first. Tiffany and I both went to Southern Africa first. But what would your advice be for someone who had the same question, that they were open to traveling to anywhere in Kenya, but was wondering the differences between both and which they should do first?
So, I mean, I love both destinations, so I never want to put one against the other, but I would say, you know, before I went to Kenya, I had in my mind, you know, safari experience with those wide open plains, scenery, kind of the Hemingway style, tented accommodations, and it delivered for sure. South Africa on the other end, I wouldn't say it's as wild and open, but if you want to combine it, if you're really into, you know, food and wine and want to combine it with like a city like Cape Town, which is amazing, that may be more of the selection for you. So
Right.
that's kind of what
Yeah.
I feel.
I feel like you have to see both. Like you can't
You should just do both, yeah.
one or the other. But yeah, I do agree that I think what most people envision Africa looking like if they haven't been before is really what Kenya looks like. That's what we've seen in movies and, you know, The Lion King and things like that. So, and there also is like a cultural aspect that's really, you know, prevalent in Kenya that you don't see as much of in Southern Africa. It's there, you just don't see that tribal, you know, presence as much. So that's something to think about too, especially for families.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree. And then you get into, you know, Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, all those countries to offer something so totally unique that just leaves you hooked. I mean, it's like the United States. It's you can't just go to Texas and generalize it that it's going to be the same as you know, Arizona or Chicago or something. They all are just such a unique and wonderful experience. Okay. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them in. We kind of covered a lot in a short amount of time, and we're going to move on to your questions. But MJ, while everyone's typing in their questions, tell us how someone can reach you if they have any more specific, detailed questions.
Sure. So if you work with a specific designer already, you can reach out to them. But you'll see my email there as well as our 800 number, and you can just ask for me. And then you'll see some other ways to connect with us on the slide.
Great. Yeah, and we do have a few questions here. One is if U.S. citizens can travel to the countries that are open like Kenya. Yes, finally, all states, all people from the United States. There was a little period there where those of us from Texas, Sarah and I, were not welcome to Kenya, so we were excited when that changed. And yeah, there are several other countries that are open to U.S. citizens right now. In Africa, you know, Rwanda, Tanzania, Namibia, there's South Africa, unfortunately, is not yet open to Americans, but it's slowly getting there. And then, you know, other places like Croatia and Costa Rica is opening up soon. So there's lots of good, I think November 1st is when Costa Rica is opening.
Yep.
Everyone. So yeah, lots of good countries you can get to now. And again, for a last minute trip, this is probably the only time in our lives we'll ever actually get space at great places for a last minute trip. So jump on it. Another question is, what procedures do you have in place for Ker Downey travelers to get their COVID tests before they depart Africa to return to the USA? Will you take us to a clinic and assure that we have the printed results in good time before we need to leave our remote camps 2 days early for COVID tests, then return to camp for the last day? Thank you for addressing these concerns. We did kind of talk about that. I don't know if one of you wants to, I'm happy to emphasize it, but we kind of talked about that already in the presentation. Definitely within Kenya, there are really great coordinated efforts to allow for testing that is not really disruptive to your safari. So yes, it will take a few hours out of your midday or early afternoon, but you otherwise aren't having to like fly back to Nairobi or put a few nights in Nairobi to account for that. And as far as testing prior to your departure from the States, it really is going to depend on where you are. We do have some options that we can provide you for mail-in, but honestly, if you live near a city, that has testing, that's going to be your best option. I've done it here in Houston. It's simple, quick turnaround times now. So just if you have further questions on that, your designer can definitely assist based on your particular trip and where you're located. The inter-Kenya flights.
How many seats? Yeah.
About how many seats?
MJ, you want to speak on that a little bit?
That can vary on the route, but usually they're smaller aircraft, you know, like 8 to 10. We can also arrange for private charters. So especially if you're traveling with, you know, family or friends, most of the time I do cost that out. You know, it's good to cost that out as well, because sometimes it's not that much more and it's worth that. And then it's just you on that aircraft.
Yeah, I think you typically break even on those charter flights. With
if you have more than like, 4 people or something.
Yeah, if you have like about 6 people, it's definitely worth it to charters. But even for 4 people or 2, sometimes it's not a significant increase in cost.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then you'd have just your own party. But I would say the largest you'd see on one of those flights would probably be like 15, maybe.
Yeah. I've always been on ones that have been like 10 or less, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is Botswana open to US citizens? Not yet. We are monitoring that closely. There are a lot of, obviously, there are some entities within these countries like Botswana, like all of the people that are in tourism in Botswana are coming together and working really closely with their local government to encourage the reopening of the borders as soon as possible. And then you also have, people at the US level organizations, tourism organizations, same thing in Europe, that are working really closely with governments all around the world to get borders open as quickly as possible. And we are members of several of those organizations, so we can keep up-to-date information for you, and we'll be really excited to announce that when it is time.
Well.
Do you recommend one country or multiple country itinerary with changing COVID rules?
Yeah, I think, I think that's a personal preference, to be honest. I think it depends on the type of traveler you are. I think Kenya specifically is a great one country destination. A lot of people would combine Kenya and Tanzania together. Right now, that flight that we used to book from the Masai Mara and Serengeti is not operating, right?
Not currently.
Not currently, but there's.
Not currently. So, like for instance, if you were to, a typical combination would be that it would probably just be easier to take advantage of seeing more of Kenya or more of Tanzania at that time, because typically people that book that flight are really just seeing the Masai Mara or the Serengeti and then leaving, because of time constraints. So I would say that it is a personal preference. Now, all that to say, I think as we move further along, just seeing how Kenya has put these incredible measures, Zambia, they also have tests in the properties. I think South Africa and all the countries that it leads to is going to follow suit. And it will just be a new normal that is not an issue. So I really do think it is the type of traveler that you are. But I do know that anywhere we would recommend, we will assist with all those procedures that, so that you can be prepared.
And there are obvious benefits, which we've kind of talked about before, to doing one country itineraries, which is you really get to immerse yourself in that specific destination, and hopefully feel like you've seen it all and not necessarily like, oh, I need to go back because I missed this or I missed that. So there are some benefits to that. But then, for some people, you're going a long ways and you might want to, especially if you have the time to, see more places, there's an obvious benefit to that as well. The next question is there a world-class hospital in Nairobi if there are health issues, COVID or other? Which I'll answer that just real quickly. Yes, Nairobi does have world-class hospitals, and this is now a requirement, but it's actually something that we at Ker Downey have always included. There's a flying doctors insurance that we include with every trip to Kenya and Tanzania. And what it does is get you from your camp to one of the world-class hospitals in Nairobi should any medical issues arise while on your trip. And that's included in every single trip. And then beyond that, we always recommend trip insurance, standard full coverage that would offer even more protection, like if you needed to be flown to Europe or back to the US for something more severe, and would cover your medical costs and all of that. So, and then also related to that question, MJ, you can answer this one. What are the luggage weight restrictions on the inner Kenya flights?
33 pounds and self-sided luggage, so thus packing efficiently. Again, you can do the laundry, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about packing tips.
Yeah.
And they actually do weigh the luggage.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll admit the last time I was over, I had to take something out. My scale must have not matched the Wilson Airport scale.
There are options for those that just really don't want to have to slim down their packing. You can basically purchase an
extra
cargo seat and then it'll allow you more weight. But I would encourage you to try and pack within those limitations. Like MJ said previously, you can do laundry and everything else. Do you have plans in place if the departure COVID test is positive, and are we allowed to leave the camp? So yes, there are. What most properties have done is they've have blocked off some of their rooms. As of course, this is going to vary based on where you are and what the circumstances are of your positive. Whether you're experiencing symptoms or it's just as a positive test and you're asymptomatic. Most likely, if you are asymptomatic, you would take one of their isolation rooms in the camp. So you'd have a standard room, just like the one that you had. They might just go ahead and shut your room off as an isolation room where you could stay for 10 days or until you get a positive test. And then if you were symptomatic, I always get them switched because I think it's a positive thing to have a negative result. Thank you. And then obviously for people that are experiencing symptoms, that Flying Doctors has planes that are dedicated just to COVID, moving COVID positive patients or people showing symptoms to those hospitals. So that is in place as well. Again, it will depend on the specific properties where you're staying, and we can definitely give you specifics on your itinerary. If you have questions, just contact your designer if you already have a trip planned, or if you're looking to plan one, we definitely can go into detail before booking any properties. And then another question here in our Q&A, how many days would you recommend on a safari to have the full experience?
I would at least do 10 to 12 days in country if possible, not including your flights back and forth.
Yeah.
Minimum.
And like you said earlier, MJ, you could also stay for a month or two.
Yeah. How about 6 months? No, the other thing I just want to add, Tiffany, to what you said a little earlier about the flights, IATA recently came out with the international flying since COVID started. There have only been about 44 COVID cases traced to international flying, and then that actually was earlier. Some of the cases were earlier before masks really got implemented on the flights. So for that, the chances, I believe, once you're especially in these very remote parts, because they properly test all the staff, constantly rotate them in and out. So, I think once you're there, you're in good hands.
Yeah. Actually, that's another point that I'm not sure we made before, but that's another reason why testing is so readily available in these remote areas, is because these properties also have the measures in place just to test their staff, because they want to keep their staff healthy. And then they have obviously, plans in place if someone were to test positive. And because of the remote nature of safari camps, those people that are working in the camps, they're not returning home at night. They stay there on the property. They will have quarantined before coming, starting to work. So it's really an impressive effort that all of the properties have made to make this, to make it safe and healthy to travel to Kenya and other safari destinations right now.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so if we don't have any more questions, thank you all for your questions. Those were great,
Good
great
questions.
and hopefully we were able to, you know, give you a little bit more confidence in traveling to Kenya right now. So if we have no more questions, which it looks like we've covered them all, we will sign off. If you're missing travel like we are, I feel like everything that comes out, I'm like, okay, I need to like set my plans tomorrow, you know. But if you're missing level, be sure to check out all of our social channels on Facebook or IG, Instagram. Tag us if you feel free, if you feel welcome. Next month, we are going to be talking about travel to Peru in South America. So be sure to join us for that. If you have any specific questions before then, please feel free to email this luxury@kerdowney.com account. I am checking in as well as other people on our staff. So, and then also I mentioned this earlier, if you do not receive our newsletter, we send it once a week. You can go to our website and subscribe to it. We send out updates and things like that. You get letters from the president. So those are always good to receive, and that's all we have. So be sure to join us next time. Thank you all for joining. We know that navigating travel can be overwhelming and confusing, but it does not have to be. We are here to help you along the way as we transition back into full-time world travelers again. So thank y'all all for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
MJ.